Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Redfall. I played it on the Xbox Series X, it's also available on the Series S and PC. So the story is you pick one of your characters, and they are trying to escape Redfall because, well, vampires have taken over. But using creepy crazy magic, they made this giant wave thing, your ship crashes, and now you've decided to team up with other survivors to try and, save the town from vampires. And I'm gonna say this, the concept of the story is good, the execution of it is bad. They don't give you enough, and it's done in these weird, sparse, and sporadic ways that it doesn't really drag you through the game. And it's unfortunate because they did put some effort into lore and world building, and they just didn't do a great job of bringing it all together. As for the audio, honestly, the voiceover work is pretty good. I'm not going to say it's all amazing, but I think it also works because it's kind of cartoonish, which fits with the style. As for the music, I think the music is pretty good. It works well enough, we'll say. Then you've got the sound effects. Everything is kind of cartoony, which again fits with the vibe, so I'll say it works, but I will say the sound bites that you get and things like that, they start to really overplay themselves. And one thing in my case is I played as Remy, who has a little robot companion. That thing's footsteps get so annoying. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and I remember the original trailers for this really made it seem Left 4 Dead-like. It's absolutely not. It's an FPS, basically a Far Cry game. It's very much that open world, semi-RPG exploration. If you played a Far Cry, it will very much remind you of that. You explore, you find objectives, you find side things, and then of course you have your main mission. And the world is kind of broken up into different areas, which I didn't necessarily love because I missed a mission in the first area and I couldn't go back and do it. Although maybe you can later in the game. I definitely didn't beat it. I sunk a solid 20 hours into this game, and I think I punished myself enough. So that being said, you kind of know the idea of what you would be getting into, but it just doesn't work. One of my complaints with this game is, even though they allow you to, and they say you can play single player, a lot of the design elements still feel very, very based around multiplayer. Like having buddies playing in a co-op manner. When it comes to the map, objectives aren't automatically marked, you have to mark them manually, and when you do, it puts your name on them, so that, your buddies would know that you want to go here. It has nothing to do with, you wanting to go there or playing solo. The only way they get automatically marked is if you're within a certain distance of them, but even then, that doesn't work all the time. A lot of the special vampires, their attacks feel built around having buddies there to save your ass. When it comes to the healing, the health packs don't really heal you enough because you're meant to have buddies who can pick you up. So despite the fact they're saying that this is a single player game, it's really not built around it. But let's see, other things that really sucked. Oh yeah, the NPCs telling you that they have safe houses set up around the city, but they don't tell you where they aren't marked on the map. You have to stumble across them, which is problematic because that makes it feel like something you can skip, but you really can't, because if you want to beat the main vampires in those areas, you have to beat the underbosses, which you can only do if you find the safe houses. This also has some looter-ish elements where, you can find a lot of different weapons throughout the game, because as you level up, although this is one of those games with scaling enemies, so leveling doesn't really matter that much. Because, yeah, you level up, you get higher level guns, but your enemies have more health, so it all balances anyways. But one thing that's really shit and annoying about this looter element is I found a rifle that had a suppressor and optics, but then it became obsolete, and my new rifle didn't have a suppressor or optics. And you can't buy attachments, so you're just kind of luck of the draw, and that would be totally fine if it was a purely visual thing, but they're not. Suppressors and optics actually function in this game. I was able to do sneaky things with this suppressed rifle, but so when my next one wasn't, I couldn't do the same sneaky things. While we are talking about weapons, I do think it's actually kind of cool though that they have, weapons that are specific to taking out vampires, like the stake launcher or the UV gun. The UV gun turns them into stone, which not as useful as it sounds, because it takes a minute to turn them into stone, then you have to switch to a regular gun to shoot them. Whereas the stake launcher just does massive damage. It's slow, but massive damage. But then again, the UV gun is slow. But here's another problem I had with weapons is when you're looking in the store to buy a new weapon, which the selection is always shit, you can only compare to the weapon you have in your first inventory slot, or at least that's all I could get it to compare to. Which is problematic when I have my rifle in my second slot and I want to get a new rifle that's in the store and I can't compare them. Then you've got things like the enemy AI, which is just boring. They're really just very uninteresting and they just kind of come at you. They don't have any really interesting tactics. And while we're in here, let's talk about the menu navigation, which is just garbage. The way it's set up, it's not highly functional, and I've had times where my cursor disappeared, so navigating menus without your cursor, not great. You can sort of use the D-pad, but it doesn't move in a natural manner sometimes, so it doesn't work great. And honestly, I ran into so many things, I'm probably forgetting a few things, but let's just move on to the controls, which I think they're well mapped, but the default camera settings are just garbage. Fortunately, I found how to change the settings to make them slightly better on, I think it was purexbox.com, but they became functional there. I still wouldn't say they're perfect. And then the controls aren't super responsive. The number of times I had to try and reload, I would have to hit the button multiple times to reload, and that was just obviously very frustrating. And I guess this is a little more gameplay mechanics or whatnot, but also picking up items, because you have to pick up items to convert to money and so on. Like, you have to be aimed directly on them for it to work. Because if there's anything to read within 5 feet, you're gonna read that instead of pick up the item. So garbage there as well. Now let's get into the graphics and visuals, and I'm going to say that I like the visual style of this game. I think the art direction they took is really cool. It feels kind of Dishonored, where everybody, they look human, but they look very cartoony, and I think it worked well, and it brought something kind of different to the whole vampire thing. I do wish there were more designs for the vampires. I think that would have been nice. But I think what they did with the world and bringing the town to life from a visual standpoint, like the design, I think all of that was really cool. You do get that smaller town vibe from it. Just everything they're doing visually to try and bring the world to life, they do a good job on. They even add elements like I found a dude who was depressed in a graveyard and ended his life, or kids' bicycles, and just kind of stuff like that. Like, these kids had clearly been going out into the woods to explore and have a good time, and, vampire apocalypse happens. So I think they did a good job with some things like that. They also did some interesting things with, the clouds actually impacting the shadows on the ground, and you can see the clouds moving. I think small details like that are good. But then you run into other small details, specifically animations that are just weird and kind of busted. This is a vampire game. As I pointed out, you have unique vampire weapons like the stake launchers. There's 2 different stake launchers, but they share one animation despite the fact they load very differently. One loads from the bottom right, the other loads from the top left, but the animation is only for the bottom right loading. And that may sound nitpicky, but then when you see that they have the animation for a clockwork shotgun where you actually load shells, crank it, load shells, crank it, and the shotgun even has an ejector rod, which they use. So they put the effort into animating this really obscure shotgun. Well, not obscure in the video game world. But then they don't take the time to animate weapons that are unique to their own universe and applied to their own lore. Stuff like that's kind of trashy. But just graphically, I did have my fair share of issues, textures popping in, a lot of glitching through walls. I think with some work, they could get the graphics to really match the design and just bring it to life even better than it was. I mean, I think they did well, but they could do better, and there are things that they really need to do to bring the whole thing together from a visual standpoint. But even the guns are kind of cool, but then you have these weird junkerized ones. That's how I'm describing them, because they're kind of trashy looking, and I just don't like them compared to the regular ones, but that's probably a little more personal preference. I could keep beating on this, but I'm just going to hit on a few of the last glitches I ran into, apart from not too many issues of crashing, but I did crash at least once. I have major issues with the fact that I have to set up a fucking Bethesda account just to play the goddamn game. I'm sick of that shit. While actually playing, though, I ran into a point where I couldn't open my map or crouch. I would just get noises instead of actually going into that menu. It wasn't even the map, it was just the full menu. I couldn't go into my menu at all. and I couldn't crouch. So that was just frustrating. Then there was a point in time where my little robo companion, he just vanished, and I had to actually quit out the game and come back in for him to exist once more, which then led to him being duplicated, which I guess that was kind of baller. And then, as I mentioned, the cursor disappeared from my map and my menu, which makes it really hard to navigate, especially your map. So now I'm just going to get into the wrap-up. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, like I always am, I didn't buy this game. I wasn't super interested in playing this game. So I renewed my Xbox Game Pass and played it through there. I'd rather pay $9.99 than, the full price. And I'm gonna say, paying $9.99 for the state that this game is in was too goddamn much. And honestly, when I first started playing, for a few hours, I was like, okay, I mean, I don't think it's great, but I don't know that it's the raging dumpster fire it's being sold as by all the other outlets. But then the more I played it, the more issues I ran into, like failure to pull everything together. I really did start to feel that it just isn't there. Like, honestly, even if they patch the shit out of this game, get everything running correctly, this game still really only reaches, like, a good status. Like, it wouldn't be great. And I did admittedly hear that, like, this isn't Arcane's, like, main team. This is one of their, like, lesser teams, like their, B or C teams that developed this, and it really does show throughout. So, on sale, on Game Pass, I still don't think it's worth the time, unfortunately. I really would have liked to play a new cool vampire game. This just doesn't hit that. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me what is your favorite vampire video game? I don't remember if I've asked that already. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.